I'm kind of trapped here. I need to climb up the pew to get out. All right, this is working. We're good to go. Yes, here we are. Yep, only 4 verses today. Very short. All right. Then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. Then Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." I'm just ready to go here.
Thank you. You know, last week I made Mason read an entire chapter. So it was like, all right, you got one slide today to read. The Great Commission. Yes, what a great thing to chase a series on stillness, right? We've been at that whole series of stillness and learning about what it means to be still. And now we're starting a series on go. And here's the crazy thing. Those two things do not contradict each other. Those two things work together. And we're going to see how that works out in our lives. And it's not just something that, you know, Jesus had to say 2,000 years ago to a group of people in Jerusalem. He's saying it to us today here in the Pacific Northwest, in Kalama. He's saying it to us, you know? So I don't know if any of you guys have little sweet spots that you know about where, and maybe, I'm sure people have this experience, because I know a couple of people who have this one specific one. So I live in Longview, and there was a time that I worked out in Wahkiakum County. And if you guys know Ocean Beach Highway, also known as SR4, right? So I would come down off the hill and turn on to SR4, like at one end of town, kind of almost by like the Catlin Bridge, right? And I was going to take SR4 all the way out to Wahkiakum County Health and Human Services. And it was super early in the morning that I would have to get out there to go. And if I timed it just right, and you kept the speed limit and you maintained it and you timed it just right, you can. It's like a miracle of Jesus, but I managed to nail this miracle at least 3 times a week. You could get all the way from like Catlin Bridge all the way out to where you're like heading for the beach and hit every green light. It can be done. You can do that. And I don't know if you know a couple of areas where there's like the long strip and there's like a million intersections, just a ton. But you know that there is that perfect sweet spot timing where, and it's crazy because you're sitting there and I'm like, okay, Jesus, let's get this timing down. And you're like, it's like the one time on the whole drive that I pray the whole way. Once I get past the last light and I'm winding for like 15-ish, 20 minutes, out to Wahkiakum County Health and Human Services. The only time I prayed after that, if I got stuck behind a logging truck. Yeah. But like my mind went off to all these other things. But I was focused in prayer with Jesus, that whole strip, trying to get through Longview as fast as I could. Because you would get that speed and you're like going at this. And you know the speed kind of ups a little bit as you get closer and closer out of town too. But you got to watch when the speed change happens, move your speed up. And you're looking at this red light, you know, and you're like going and you're like, okay, Lord, that sucker's going to turn green. It's going to turn green. It's going to turn green. And you get a little nervous and you start to like feel the brake a little bit because you're like, okay. And then it flips green. You're like, back on the gas, get through it, you know, and you're going. And then there's also those times where you're like almost there, but it's going to start to turn yellow and you could gun it, but you don't have to gun it. It's gonna just sit there for you and you're gonna get through that thing, but you can green light it all the way through there. If it's in God's perfect timing and you maintain the speed and you are focused in prayer, it happens, it really does happen. But so that was my experience on some mornings in the morning. And I get done. And then there's the mornings that you're like, oh, the timing was off. My speed was off. And I hit like 60, 70% of the reds. and you're just stuck sitting there waiting, and you're like, and once you hit a red, you can't get yourself back to that sweet spot. You can't. Like, you hit the red and you're like, dang it, well, there goes the morning, right? Because it's just, there's just no way to get into the pattern of all of the green light goes, And I think about, obviously this is an analogy for life, guys. This, it's a sermon, right? But it's like that with Jesus at times, right? Like, sometimes I feel like, Lord, I'm like going down the road and I'm talking with you and I'm going with you, but I get distracted and I keep getting stuck at these red lights. And sometimes I'm a little weird and I gun it on the yellow, and I shouldn't have, because maybe I was supposed to slow down at that point, right? And have you ever sat at a red light and then you spaced and you needed somebody to honk at you to get going? Yeah, okay, so that happens too, right? Sometimes the person honking at you, there's the mean honkers, and then there's that little like toot toot honkers who are just like, hey, by the way, it's green, What kind of honker are you? That's the other question. If you're the person in the back, are you a kind honker? Sometimes, maybe. But maybe today, during the course of this little discussion we're about to have, you're like, dude, I'm sitting at a red light and I'm spaced out. And the light turned green, and God's like popping the horn at me kindly, and he's about ready to blast that thing at me. Like, get going. Like, let's go. Or you should slow down when it turns yellow, right? And maybe not gun it. Yellow does not mean go very, very fast. But this is just the thing, is that we are not following these traffic signals sometimes. But walking with Jesus is going to be all the rough patches of all of it. And aren't we hoping for like just that green light, go? And if you're in it and you're focused on him and you've got your eye on Jesus and his timing is perfect and you got on at just the right time, you're going to make it all the way through. And this is the other little fun part. When you get through each each green light as you're going, as soon as you pass through, like, I don't even know how many lights there are on SR4. I should know that. But every time you go through and you're flying through it, like, you feel so cool flying through that thing. And there's this joy that comes and you're like rejoicing. And you're like, yeah, Jesus. As you're going through each one. And I'm like, my week should have been like that. Like, how many like green light goes and I got to sail through an intersection. God did something super cool. Did I stop and rejoice? Did I stop and worship him? Was I excited about it? I'm so excited over a green light. Shouldn't I be excited about a cool interaction with a person I had that week? Because that actually matters. You know what I'm saying? Like, that actually matters. And so throughout your day, maybe every person that you see around you is like a stoplight to some degree. And sometimes God's saying, like, no, stop for this. I want you to stop for this one. And while you're talking, I want you to, here's some yellow light, take us slow with this person. And then all of a sudden, here's the green light and here's the go. Like, maybe God's prompting you to say something. It's time for the go. It's time to say something, The worst thing is to just like avoid the intersections. How many of you drive like that? I do. I know how to get around town to places and avoid all the intersections and cut the neighborhoods. Don't we do that? Yeah, we cut the intersections out. And so as we go through this Go series, we're going to be looking at always people on their way, and they stop for someone. And as they stop for someone, they're still aware that there are yellow lights and green lights in that moment, not to go to take off, but to go and to speak up, to say something. And so we're going to look at what that's like walking with Jesus. And this is the coolest thing, is like, you realize that it's there's the festivals that go on, but then every day that something cool happens in your Bible, it was a normal day. Like, it was a normal day. It was like last week and this week to come. It was a normal week on a normal day, and God did something exceptional that changed a life. And it doesn't just change the life of the person you're encountering, it changes your own. If we're just picking up on the signals, right? So We're going to dive some more on this and look at first this landscape of this, what it was like when this Great Commission took place. Okay, so when you look at the context, I want to look at the context of where they were at, and then look at the context of where the disciples were at, because they're a context. Just like we're a context. Right now, you came in feeling like on cloud nine or beat up or exhausted or whatever, you're a context, right? So this Great Commission, when it takes place, depending on if you were like to check out where this sucker takes place, you're like, oh, this is the Matthew Great Commission, right? And it says that they were leaving Galilee. If you're checking out Luke, and Acts, because those guys dovetail, right? It gives you this location that is happening, that Jesus is in Jerusalem, and then he gave the Great Commission just outside of Bethany. So here's what goes on. Jesus dies. He resurrects from the grave. And then there's these little Jesus sightings that start to take place. He shows up with Mary Magdalene. He shows up on the road to Emmaus with 2 disciples. He then shows up in the upper room when the disciples were there. He chats it out with Thomas, and then even though Jesus had told them, don't leave Jerusalem because the Holy Spirit is going to come, they take off and go to Galilee. And the disciples are out there fishing on the sea, the lake, when Jesus shows up again. And then he chats it out with Peter, right? And then at some point, between Galilee and Bethany, they have their mountaintop with the Great Commission. Jesus ascends. They head on into Jerusalem for Pentecost, because Pentecost was already a Jewish holiday. And then the Holy Spirit comes. But we have to look at this I think it's weird in my own thing. I'm like, if I followed Jesus for 3 years, and then he died and he resurrected, and there was these little Jesus sightings around Jerusalem, and he had said, stay in Jerusalem, I would have a hard time going back to Galilee, because I would be still stuck in this context that he can only be in one place at one time. So I don't want to miss out on the next Jesus sighting, and the Jesus sightings are happening around Jerusalem, and I don't want to run off to Galilee because I might miss him, and he did say to stick around, But the disciples did what was normal to culture, right? Everyone would gather into Jerusalem for Passover season and then go back home. And then some of them would come back for Pentecost. But they did what everyone else did. They went home. At some point, they had to decide there was nothing left in Jerusalem for them, even though Jesus said, stick around. They go back. And so Jesus tails it over there. I want to know if he walked and talked to a bazillion people on the road on his way, or if he just teleported. Don't you want to know that? I really want to know that. It doesn't tell you. He could do anything he wants, right? It's just Jesus. So he could have just whatever, I'm just going to teleport. I'm going to save myself some time. Or he took his time and walked the road, and he talked to people, and we just don't know those stories. You know what I'm saying? Just like the road to the Emmaus boys. That could have happened. But either way, he left to go after not just the one, because it was all of his boys, but he left to go after them and bring them back. And that's the bit. He goes out and he brings you back. So he took the journey back. And some point prior to Bethany is about 5 miles out from Jerusalem. So at some point pre-Bethany, Luke says Luke says it's outside of Bethany that this Great Commission happens. Matthew says it's outside of Galilee. That's a pretty big scope right there. There's a lot of hills amongst that. I kind of think it's good that it gives us this mega mile radius right there, because don't you think people are going to get all hung up on what peak it was? There's no way to know the peak in that area, so we don't get all idly and hung up on stuff like that this is the spot he ascended, this is the spot he will come back. I love that it's just this massive range area, because that way we don't get hung up on what doesn't matter. It's not the spot. But what we do know is, even at that point that they gather, some of the disciples still doubted. Now, who was doubting, you guys? Some of the disciples still doubted. Some of them were still struggling. Look at this. I jumped way ahead of my notes here. You can grab that next slide. I think I highlighted. Yes, but some still doubted. So who doubted? You're like, Thomas, let's just throw him under the bus. Maybe he was fine though by then. I mean, he got Sam. Maybe it was Peter. He's always having his trouble, but he just had a big, huge hash out with Jesus on the shore, right? So maybe those two guys were the only two not doubting. Maybe it's actually Matthew. Maybe he puts it in there because there's a little piece of confession. He knows he's not the only one, but he puts it in there. And here's the best part of this. Even though these guys wandered around with him for 3 years, witnessed all the miracles, witnessed him alive and well, he even tracked them down in Galilee and brought them back. You guys, they still doubted. And I want to talk about that context, okay? They still struggled in their walk with Jesus, and Jesus commissioned them anyways. He takes you right where you're at. Don't think that you have to have all your ducks in a row and be all that in a bag of chips before you can share Jesus with somebody. He takes you even when you're doubting. He takes you right where you're at. At this point, with what faith you have, he can use it because he's God and he can do what he likes with whatever measure of faith we have, right? So this is where he's at. You can grab that next slide. If you were amongst the disciples, would you have been one of the ones that was doubting? Would you? Now you might go, oh no, but doubting's so bad. It's so wrong. And I want us to kind of look at doubting a little differently here. Is that doubting happens when you're in a hard space, doesn't it? Doubting starts to happen. You don't doubt when everything is going right. You doubt when it's hard, when the road is difficult. That's when you doubt. And then you have to ask, did God call you to an easy road or a hard road? He called you to a hard one, right? But he called you to it not alone. So this is the thing, is that faith, when we really are looking at this, well, I'll put it this way. There's different kinds of ways in which people will relate to things. Like there's people who will say, oh my goodness, I have faith that God is going to come through. And then they're really extravagant about how God will come through. And they're really, really have a big voice about it. And it sounds fantastic. And you're like, wow, that person has amazing faith. But then when the week gets on and you look at their week, not to be all judgy and judging people's walk, but I'm judgy and I judge people's walk. And I confess that. But sometimes our lives just kind of look like the rest of the world. Like there's still, because it is understandable that we get concerned about our bills, right? But there's, you're going to have concern for your bills. But there's people who live for money and people who don't live for money, right? In the end, money became the deciding factor for them on things, right? The world, in the end, money becomes the deciding factor. A person of faith, money does not become the deciding factor. And yet, so often, Christians just look like the rest of the world because there's a little game of risk when it comes to faith, right? Because faith has to involve trust, so there's a game of risk in it. It's okay, Lord, if my time, if my energy, if my attention goes to these things you're calling me to, I might not have enough left over to care for these concerns. So what does the world do? The world jumps in and just cares about all of the things over here and gives God their leftover. You cannot boast about having faith if that's how you're operating. But if you're the person over here who's like, okay, Lord, use me up if that's what that means. Again, God is the one who is going to continually pour in, right? He will fish and loave your spirit. He will fish and loave you. You will have enough to care for the things over here. Somehow it's going to get taken care of, right? And it may not be to the standards of the world, but you don't live by that standard anymore. Does that make some sense? It's this part of where walking, if you're walking it this way, having faith in God is easy because you don't really have faith in God. You don't really have any skin in the game at all when it comes to trusting him. But when you're over here walking it out with Jesus, you got skin in the game. there's that thought of he could actually fail me. This could all go bad. There's a trust actually involved in this one. And it's so hard when you look at the church, you look at Christians, and there's those who chase after Jesus and they've got skin in the game. And then you have those who still look like the rest of the world. They don't really have any skin in the game. Their concerns match the world's in a different kind of way. But then they're really good at spouting that they have this amazing faith. And you know who speaks with a little bit of doubt in their voice? The ones who are actually in it. And that's okay, because it means they're actually in it. Actually in it. And I think that that's one of the precious things about the beautiful humility that I see in conversations with people around here, is that reality of it's okay to say, I'm kind of scared. Yes, Jesus is going to tell us not to fear, but it means that you are at least in a place where fear is a very real thing, and that you're trusting him in it, right? So you can grab that next slide. Is that forward or backward? Okay, there we go. When it comes down to it, does your life look like the rest of the world? So think about that for a second. Does your life look like the rest of the world? There's all the things that we have to do. You go to work, you pay your bills, you pay your taxes, you clean your yard. There's these things, but there's a different underlining of it. What level are you invested in that, right? What's the overall goal? There's people who's they just live for that chance to interact with people and see where that goes, and if they can share Christ with them, and that's the hope when they get out of bed. And then maybe for others, it's I hope I, earn some money today, because I want to pay that bill. It's the other person who's hoping to share Christ with someone that day still is going to go to work and pay their bill. It's just not the focus anymore, right? And when they walk out the day, it's going to show up in a different kind of way. They're going to be looking if there's a red, green, or yellow light. The other person is not even aware of that. Are your worries and concerns the same? And are you doing everything you can, just like everyone else, to care for those concerns? Think about it for a second. When you were talking from a believer to a non-believer, how much of your life really does look exactly the same as theirs? Your concerns are exactly the same. The only difference is that you clock in on Sunday morning. You know what I'm saying? You clock into church. Other than that, you actually look like everybody else, and everyone else might volunteer in some place and you volunteer in a couple places, or maybe you don't even volunteer and they're actually better at caring for other people throughout the week. How is that a life changed by Jesus and a life of faith when it looks just like the rest of the world? We're called to live differently. That's what this Great Commission is, right? We're called to live differently. And so you can kind of pick out sometimes when you look at this, and it might be convicting even for ourselves, how many ways do I carry the fears of the world that I'm not supposed to be carrying? Because I am just hashing out in that part of life and I'm not adventuring into this other area. So when we look at this, you can grab that next slide. Jesus has these little specifics, right? He says, therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them. All right. It doesn't mean you have to go cross into another country, but here's the thing. Sometimes the nations gather around you. Isn't that true? When Jesus tells his disciples this, they're going to trek into Jerusalem, which is a city where a lot of nations pass through. And there's a lot of Gentiles in the city, a lot of Jews in the city. And even the Jews that are coming and collecting in there are from all these different nations. And that's why at Pentecost, when they start to speak in all these different languages, they're stunned that they know all these different languages because they're from all these different nations. And so even though they went into Jerusalem, there was multiple nations being represented in there. And then they got the gospel and they took it out and took it back with them, right? So if we're called to make disciples of all nations, and you're like, I'm probably not going to cross the border anytime soon, that's okay. You live in America. People have crossed the border to come here. Who is Jesus calling you to? He's calling you to the refugee. He's calling you to the people who have crossed in. And are you objectifying them? Or do you see people that Jesus loved and died for and gave you a green light to go talk to? And may they come to know Jesus and spread Jesus with wild affection. If they travel back to where their home country is, may they spread it there, spread Jesus there, spread the gospel there too, right? We have this kind of Pentecost moment in our hub, right? And I think that that's a really important thing. We're in the midst of a nation that objectifies people constantly. Aren't we just putting these little categories on people groups right now and then assigning if we're supposed to like them or not? How very non-kingdom of heaven-ish, very non-kingdom of heaven-ish. Like, I don't know where that's coming from. It ain't coming from Jesus, right? This is what we're called to make disciples of all nations, to go and love them. They're people. Go love people. That's what Jesus is saying. Just go love people. I'll take care of everything else. Just go love people. Don't have an excuse to not go love people. It's not going to go well. So even within your neighborhood, now it doesn't have to even be someone of a different nationality. It could be someone of a different generation. Maybe you're like, I'm bilingual and it's easy for me to talk to people of this one nation, but I am terrible at talking to teenagers. You know what I mean? Like, they're almost their own nation, aren't they? In some way, just again, we can objectify a group. Go and talk and make disciples. And then you can grab the next slide. And then he says, teach them to obey. Teach them to obey. This concept of obey is that part of like when we talk about these concepts of to listen. If you really heard it, are you going to act on it? Teach them to obey. This is about having intention. The first one's about having intentionality too. But when you interact with people, is there intention to interact with them? And it doesn't mean that you walk up and you just start preaching to people, because that's just awkward. That's just one of my friends. Like, God calls us to not be normal, right? And this is the bottom line. If I was just going to sum up the sermon, like, stop acting normal, right? But we do also have this funny little thing, like, be normal for Jesus, which is like, just don't go up and just start spouting a sermon at someone. But to teach them to obey, think about teaching for a second and what a colorful word that is, and how many different ways you can teach. How many different ways? Sometimes it's in your example, right? It's in your example. Sometimes teaching them is in how you speak to them. Teaching people is being open with your story and not leaving Jesus out of your story. When you talk about your life and your story, is Jesus literally like the main character of your story and you're just a side character? Shouldn't you be a side character in your own story? I mean, come on. I think that's the difference. The people who will claim to be Christian, I know I'm sounding pretty terrible here, but they'll claim to be Christian, but they look just like the rest of the world. They look like the rest of the world because they're the main character in their own story. And then when we talk about Jesus and that he'll come through as a side character, the people over really living it out are not the main character in their story. Jesus is the main character of their story, and they're the side character. you know? and that's how they see and understand and live their life. Who are you in the story? Who are you in that story? And that's what Jesus is inviting them to in this. He's like, it's time. It's time to stop being the main character. Stop being the main character in this story that is laid out for you. When you want to grab that next slide for me, thank you. Okay, and we see it in this word. This is the great word, go. Okay, when Jesus says go, some people, when you say go, it could be like an immediate, like you've done this. You said, hey, can you go do this? And it's one isolated. They go do it. They do it right now, and it's done. Right? That's not the tense of this word. This word Jesus used for go is in the ongoing tense, which means at no time does this Great Commission let up. It actually is translated, as you are going, make disciples. As you are going. So this is the thing. As you are going in your week, make disciples. As you are going, take the red light and stop at the intersection. As you are going, stop. And don't blow past people. As you're going, stop. And then while you're with that person, be focused and in prayer. And maybe God has to blast the horn a couple of times while he's trying to get you to realize he just gave you a green go, which means share your story and make sure I'm the main character. Like share your story, stop being the main character in your own story. I don't know how many times I'm telling my story, and I'm like, I'm the main character. Well, that just doesn't make sense. If I follow Jesus, I shouldn't be the main character in my story. Okay. And so this go is the ongoing tense. As you're going, make disciples of all nations. Don't judge the person first and decide, nah, God doesn't want me to talk to them. No, talk to them. Don't judge if you're supposed to talk to that person. It might be odd if you talk to them. You know what's great? I was always telling Christina, I said, one of my favorite stories is Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch. And so you're going to get that story in this, right? Because there's so many reasons for those two to not be talking. So many reasons. Or Jesus stops for the woman who'd been bleeding for 12 years. So many reasons for him to not stop and be talking to her, right? So many reasons. But if he's going to make a disciple of all nations, he's not going to judge them by their nation. He's going to stop and not act like there's not a green light to go at that point in sharing. So as you are going, teach people to obey. Maybe how they learn is they see that you do. They see that there's something very different. That when they interact with you, they interacted with the character and attributes of God because God is growing you into that, right? And they walk away feeling encouraged. They walk away feeling seen because your God sees them. They walk away feeling encouraged because your God is encouraging. They walk away feeling known because their God knows them. When they walk away from you, this is the encounter that they've had. And you know what, y'all, it's going to take up your time. And you're not going to accomplish the other things that you had planned in your day. So what? That's what I have to start telling myself. So what? If I accomplished all the things I wanted to accomplish today, then I look like the rest of the world because they're all making their lists. I do make lists. I'm a list person. But there's my list and there's Jesus's list for the day. The world is trying to make sure their list happens. If I'm following Jesus, it's not my list that's going to happen that day. I don't know what your list is for the week. I already have my list planned for the week, you guys. It's probably not the best thing. I got my list planned for the week. Okay. So there's this go, right? And then also, here's the next part. I think I know what my next slide is. Is there no slide? Yes, it's the therefore. I think I have the therefore. Okay. So in seminary, they would always, every single time we came across a therefore, we would say, what is that therefore? Therefore. Have you heard that? Yeah. What is that therefore? Therefore. Paul in his letter, Paul loves therefore, right? Because he states this stuff and then he says therefore, and then he gives you like the action. He gives you the instruction. Here's what's so cool. Okay, so if you see the therefore, you have to look at what Jesus said before it, and he says, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, ooh." If all authority is given to him in heaven and on earth, therefore go, that gives you a pretty sweet green light. Like, that tells you that he is in the heavy thick of the go, right? Because when you go make disciples, when you go and you teach, when you go and you baptize, when you go, it's under his authority on heaven and on earth, not in your own. Isn't that amazing? It's not in your own. So that can't be an excuse. Oh my gosh, let's just start knocking the excuse. I can't use that excuse. I can't use that excuse. You know, it's not in your own authority. It's in his. So all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore, let's go. Let's go. Let's go. You're banking on that so you can go do the rest. And then he bookends it because he's cool like that. He does this little bookends thing. He sandwiches it. And he says, and surely I'm with you always to the very end of the age, right? So it's this like, I have all authority, y'all. So now go do this. Also, the dude with all the authority, never gonna leave you. So when you have, I have all authority and I'm never gonna leave you, bookending this great commission, why would we drag our feet? Unless we want to look like the rest of the world, you know? So here's the thing when it comes to being still, right? To go to do this great commission in the ongoing tense as you go this week, share your story and don't be the main character, but share who Jesus is. And you don't have to be weird about it. Jesus can come up pretty naturally. You know what I'm saying? Let them share their story first. Have you ever had somebody share their story with you and you could see how Jesus came through in a bunch of ways, but they didn't see it? Yeah, I've had people do that to me where I'm like really distressed and I'm telling people and they're like, but you know what? If this person hadn't shown up there, like this wouldn't have happened. So Jesus had to have made that person show up. I'm like, oh, you're right. I need to thank him for that. You know what I mean? Like he was in it and I didn't even see it at the moment. So point out where Jesus shows up in each other's stories. You can point that out in their stories. Say, like, I have this, I believe in Jesus, by the way. And you know what? I think that that's him moving in your life. That's evidence of him moving in your life. That's him loving you and showing up for you in these ways. It's okay to say that. It is okay to say that. So here's the thing. How are you supposed to be still and go at the same time? And here's what it is, all right? So y'all know what the comfort zone is, right? This is called living like the rest of the world. This is I'm terrified to pay my bills. I have to work super hard. How's my retirement plan going? I hope I have a vacation planned. I'm not mocking this because I am also guilty of these things, okay, you guys? Also guilty, right? But this is the comfort zone, right? Because it's always within your authority and your power in heaven and on earth, right? This isn't us. And this is where the world operates. And this is where a lot of the church operates too, right? But if you're actually going to trust Jesus and you are going to go, you're going to get out of that and you're going to come over here, right? And as you are going, you're now not in your own authority. You are not in your comfort zone. Okay, we literally live in a society that worships the comfort zone. This is why we all have a really cool recliner at home. We have the chair that we retire to every evening. We know the chair. I have one of those, right? You know what I mean? Like the chair. So the comfort zone, we worship the comfort zone. We worship having control. This is when we step out of it. This is out of the comfort zone. This is the adventure zone, you guys. This is where there's a little bit of risk. This is the little, I don't know how this is going to land later because it's out of my control, but it's in the one who has all authority. And he's not leaving you while you're out here, because he's never going to leave you nor forsake you. And he's going to be with you to the end of the age. And that's crazy, which very much means this is your story. This is his story. You get to be the side character for once. It's kind of nice, actually, being the side character. There's a little less pressure being the side character. A lot of pressure in here, guys. Honestly, a little less out here, because this is the thing. We think that this is being still where it's comfortable. No, this is what it means. You can't be still and sit here. There's no being still. There's no rapa here. This is being still because he's the comfort outside the comfort zone. And rapa is finding comfort in the comforter. It's having rapa in the rafa, right? He's the healer. Okay, so he's that comfort and he's that stillness while you're going. So this whole stillness thing that we were talking about for like 6 weeks or 5 weeks or whatever that was, is in the context of a person who's going. It's in the context of the goer. And here's what's so cool. Like, your go looks so different than the other person in the pew. Like, what God's going to call you to, and what adventures God has stored up for you this week. Jesus has people for you to meet. He's got people lined up, divine appointments. Don't get comfortable over here and miss your appointments. You risk being exhausted later. That's okay. Your cup will overflow. That's who he is, right? Have you ever had a day that you were that like beautiful exhaustion that when you went to bed, you felt so good because you were so tired, because God used you up emotionally, physically, spiritually, and then he just pours this like crazy peace into you and you just pass out and fall asleep? Gosh, I wish every night was like that for me. And it could be if I was better at being out here. and I don't keep finding myself in here. Right? And so that's what's so beautiful about letting God be the Rapha, having us be still. It's always in the chaos of the storm and the peace that he pours into that. And so I love this. So this is the thing. When you're out here in this area, guess what? Sometimes you might doubt. If you're in here, you're not really doubting God because you don't really need him. Do you? No, nah. You got yourself, man. You have yourself. You know what I mean? If you doubt anything, you'll just doubt yourself, right? But you don't need him while you're in here. When you're out here now, all of a sudden you do need him, and there's a possibility of doubting at that point. And so it's a different kind of doubt. It's not, and hear this, it's not a doubt that just doubts that God even exists. It's this like, whew, this is getting a little scary. All right, Jesus is walking on the water. He asked me to walk too. Okay, take the next step, right? And what did Jesus say to Peter? Why did you doubt? But at least Peter got out of the boat. He didn't say that to the rest of them because the rest of them were all like chilling in the boat over here, right? Jesus did not tell them, why'd you doubt, to the dudes who didn't even get out of the boat, because they weren't even in the realm of it because they were too busy being in control. When Peter stepped out, he actually stepped out to where he could have some measure of doubt, and Jesus addressed it with him. That's okay. He's a God who commissions you anyways. He commissions you anyways. He can do a lot with a little, and he can do a lot with the doubt that you have. This is also why it's so cool and important that we get together and we are together, because you get to share where you're struggling and you get to share where you're doubting. And then we get to speak truth into each other and encourage each other, because that's how God set it up, right? It's okay to share that you're doubting. It's okay to share that. I love the side conversations that happen all the time. Those are the sweetest parts that take place amongst the church, are the side conversations when we get to hear each other's stories and where the struggle is. So as we continue in worship, on a hope for you to look at this week that you've had and say, okay, Lord, you're giving me another one, you know? And it's not the last week is like, oh, scrap last week. Last week we all failed. You know what I mean? I'm sure you had some victories. And you may even have had a couple of highs when you zipped through the intersection with that big, huge green light go because you shared. Like God just presented an opportunity for you to share and you went for it, and the excitement that comes from that. But you're going into another week. How is God calling you to share as you were going? Because He's the one in authority and He's not going to leave you. So let's pray. Jesus, we just pray that in this week we become even more sensitive to your spirit, that we are more focused in engaging what you want us to do this week and how you're wanting us to function and operate, Lord. And may that be consuming to where we don't have room to fear the normal things we fear. Lord, may we trust you. May we share where we struggle and where we doubt, because we all are meeting each other out here in the adventure zone this week, Lord. May we be encountering people throughout this week, every day, Lord, where we get to reflect your heart and your spirit, and they get to experience that. And Lord, also may we have the boldness to speak of you. May we become the side character, Lord, in this epic story that you are writing. And so, Lord, we lay all of this before you. And God, we await for your timing and your speed in this week to come. We love you and thank you in your precious name. Amen.